Captain Ethan Cole tightened his grip on the control panel as his spaceship shook violently. The alarms blared, and the warning lights flashed red. "System failure," the onboard AI announced in a calm yet ominous tone. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he wrestled with the controls, trying to guide the damaged ship toward the dense, green planet below. The crash was rough. Trees snapped like twigs as the ship plowed through the jungle, finally coming to a halt in a clearing. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and Ethan groaned as he unstrapped himself from his seat. His body ached, but he was alive. That was a start. Stumbling out of the wreckage, Ethan squinted against the harsh sunlight filtering through the towering trees. The air was thick and humid, filled with the sounds of strange birds and rustling leaves. The jungle was alive, vibrant, and utterly alien. "Well, this isn't Earth," he muttered, brushing dirt off his uniform. His first priority was survival. The ship's communication system was destroyed, leaving him with no way to call for help. He scavenged what supplies he could. Some rations, a water purifier, and a multi-tool. The jungle loomed around him, both beautiful and intimidating. It felt like it was watching him, waiting for his next move. As he ventured deeper into the jungle, Ethan quickly realized this planet was far from ordinary. The plants glowed faintly in the shade, and the air shimmered with tiny, luminescent insects. The ground beneath his boots was soft, almost sponge-like, and vines seemed to shift subtly as he passed. After a few hours, Ethan stopped to rest near a small stream. He knelt down, filling his canteen with water, when he heard it, a faint rustling sound. He froze, his senses on high alert. Slowly, he turned, scanning the jungle. At first, he saw nothing, just the endless expanse of trees and foliage. Then they appeared. Out of the shadows stepped a group of tall, blue-skinned women, their bodies adorned with intricate patterns of paint and jewelry made from bones and beads. Their hair was braided with leaves and flowers, and their large, piercing eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. They moved with a grace that reminded Ethan of predators, and he had no doubt they were dangerous. Ethan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I don't want trouble," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'm just passing through." The women didn't respond. Instead, they surrounded him, their movements synchronized and deliberate. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Her gaze was sharp, and she held a spear that glimmered with some kind of energy. She spoke in a language Ethan couldn't understand, her voice firm and commanding. "I don't understand you," Ethan said, taking a cautious step back. "But I'm not your enemy." The leader tilted her head, studying him intently. Her eyes flicked to the wreckage visible through the trees, then back to Ethan. She barked an order, and two of the women grabbed him by the arms. Their grip was strong, unyielding. "Great," Ethan muttered under his breath as they began leading him deeper into the jungle. "First contact, and I'm already a prisoner." As they walked, Ethan's mind raced. Who were these people? What did they want? And most importantly, how was he going to survive on this strange planet, surrounded by an alien tribe that clearly didn't trust him? The jungle grew thicker, darker, and more alive as they moved. Ethan's fear battled with his curiosity. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was certain. His life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. The jungle seemed to swallow Ethan whole as the alien women led him deeper into its heart. The towering trees, their glowing leaves casting an eerie light, formed a canopy so dense that only faint shafts of sunlight reached the ground. The air grew thicker, filled with unfamiliar scents and the distant calls of unseen creatures. Ethan's captors remained silent, their movements precise and calculated. The leader, who had spoken earlier, occasionally glanced back at him, her sharp gaze a constant reminder of who was in charge. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a clearing. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight before him, a sprawling village built into the jungle itself. Massive trees served as the foundation for elevated platforms connected by hanging bridges. The structures, made of woven vines and wood, glowed faintly, as if infused with the same bioluminescence that lit the forest. In the center of the village was a large communal area, where dozens more blue-skinned women worked, laughed, and moved with the same elegant grace as his captors. As they entered the village, the activity came to a halt. Every eye turned to Ethan. The women murmured among themselves, their language a melodic blend of clicks and hums. He felt their curiosity and suspicion pressing down on him like a weight. The leader raised her hand, silencing the crowd. She barked a few words, and the women stepped aside, creating a path to what appeared to be the center of the village. Ethan was led to a large platform adorned with intricate carvings and surrounded by glowing totems. It was clearly a place of importance. The leader turned to him, her expression unreadable. She gestured to one of the other women, who stepped forward holding a bowl filled with a thick, green liquid. The leader dipped her fingers into the bowl, then reached toward Ethan's face. Okay," Ethan muttered, trying not to flinch. He stood still as she traced the liquid across his forehead, forming what he assumed was a symbol. The substance was cool and smelled faintly of herbs. When she finished, the leader stepped back, her piercing eyes meeting his. She spoke again, this time slower and more deliberate. Ethan shook his head, frustrated by his inability to understand. "I don't know what you're saying," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I'm not your enemy. I just want to survive." The leader frowned, her gaze narrowing. She gestured to one of the women, who stepped forward with a curious device, an oval-shaped object that emitted a soft hum. She placed it near Ethan's ear, and he felt a slight vibration, followed by a faint warmth. "Speak," the leader commanded, her voice now clear and understandable. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "You can understand me now?" he asked cautiously. The leader nodded, her expression still guarded. "We hear you. Why are you here, human?" Ethan exhaled, relieved to finally communicate. "My ship crashed. I have no way to leave. I'm not here to harm you or your people." The leader studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her tone cold. "You are an outsider. Outsiders bring danger. I'm just trying to survive." Ethan replied, "I mean no harm." The leader seemed to consider his words before nodding slightly. "You will stay, but you will prove your worth." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Prove my worth? How?" The leader smirked, a hint of challenge in her gaze. "You will see." The conversation ended abruptly as the leader barked orders to the others. Ethan was led to a small platform where he was left under the watchful eyes of 2 guards. As night fell and the jungle came alive with strange sounds, Ethan sat in the dim glow of the village, his mind racing. He had no idea what proving his worth entailed, but one thing was clear. If he wanted to survive, he would have to learn their ways. For now, he was at their mercy, trapped in a world he barely understood. But deep down, Ethan felt a flicker of determination. He had survived worse. He would survive this too. Ethan woke to the soft hum of the jungle coming alive with the morning light. The bioluminescent glow of the village faded as the sun filtered through the dense canopy above. He stretched, his body aching from the hard wooden platform where he'd slept. 2 guards stood nearby, their watchful eyes a constant reminder that he wasn't yet trusted. Before he could fully gather his thoughts, the leader, whom he had heard the others call Talira, approached him. Her tall, commanding presence was impossible to ignore. She carried a spear in one hand and a bundle of woven vines in the other. "You will work today, outsider," she said, her tone firm but not hostile. Ethan rose to his feet, brushing the dirt off his pants. "Work? Doing what?" Talira gestured toward the jungle. "If you are to stay, you must prove you can contribute. Our tribe does not support the weak." "Fair enough," Ethan muttered. He followed her as she led him through the village. The alien women watched him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Some whispered to one another, their melodic language filling the air, while others stared openly, their expressions unreadable. Talira stopped near a group of women weaving long vines into what appeared to be ropes. She handed Ethan a bundle of raw vines. "Start here. Use your hands. Like this." She demonstrated, her fingers moving deftly to weave the vines into a tight, durable cord. Ethan watched closely, then tried to mimic her movements. His first few attempts were clumsy, and the women nearby laughed softly, their amusement clear even without translation. He frowned, his pride stung, but he kept trying. "I'll get it," he muttered to himself. Hours passed, and though his hands ached, Ethan slowly improved. By the time the sun was high overhead, he had managed to create several passable ropes. Talira inspected his work, nodding slightly. "You learn quickly, for a human." "I've had to adapt before," Ethan said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Survival doesn't give you much of a choice." Talira's gaze softened just a little. "Good. You may not be as useless as I thought." The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of distant drums echoing through the village. The rhythmic beats sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't need to ask what they meant. Today was going to be different. Talira stood waiting for him, her spear in hand and an expression of calm authority on her face. "Today, you will face the jungle," she said simply, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The tribe must know if you can survive." Ethan rubbed the sleep from his eyes and sighed. "I thought yesterday was tough enough. What exactly am I surviving?" Talira smirked, just slightly. "You will find out." The women of the tribe gathered in the central clearing as Talira led Ethan forward. In her other hand, she carried a small satchel, which she handed to him. Inside were a knife, a piece of flint, and a small woven pouch filled with dried fruit. "This is all you will take," she said. "You must return by sundown with proof of your survival." "Proof?" Ethan asked, frowning. "Something the jungle gives you," Talira replied. "Something useful or meaningful." Ethan looked around at the gathered women. Their eyes held a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He exhaled and nodded. "All right, let's do this." The jungle was alive with sounds and movement as Ethan stepped past the edge of the village. The dense foliage seemed to close around him, isolating him from everything familiar. He gripped the knife tightly, every nerve in his body on edge. He had survived harsh environments before, but this jungle felt different, almost as if it were testing him. He moved cautiously, keeping his senses sharp. Strange creatures darted through the trees, their eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. At one point, he heard a low growl behind him and spun around, only to see a massive feline-like predator watching him from a distance. Its sleek, blue fur rippled as it stalked closer, its sharp teeth glinting in the dappled sunlight. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. Slowly, he bent down, picked up a rock, and hurled it at the creature. The stone struck the ground near its paws, and the beast snarled before retreating into the shadows. Ethan exhaled shakily. "One challenge down," he muttered. Hours passed as Ethan navigated the jungle, his clothes soaked with sweat. He used the knife to cut through thick vines and the flint to start a small fire when he stopped to rest. Despite the challenges, he began to notice the beauty around him. The glowing flowers that pulsed with light, the intricate patterns on the leaves, and the way the jungle seemed to hum with life. As the sun dipped lower, Ethan realized he needed to find something to bring back to the tribe. He thought about what Talira had said, something the jungle gives you. He scanned his surroundings, his eyes landing on a cluster of vines wrapped around a tall tree. Among them grew a large, luminous fruit that radiated a faint warmth. Climbing the tree was no easy task. His muscles ached, and the bark was slick. But he finally reached the fruit and carefully cut it free with his knife. It was heavier than he expected, its glow intensifying as he held it in his hands. "This has to be it," he said, feeling a small sense of triumph. By the time Ethan returned to the village, the sun was just touching the horizon. The tribe gathered to meet him, their expressions a mixture of surprise and approval, as they saw the glowing fruit in his hands. Talira stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she inspected his prize. "You chose well," she said, her tone carrying a hint of respect. "This fruit is sacred. It nourishes and heals. The jungle does not give it easily." Ethan handed it to her, his exhaustion evident. "The jungle didn't make it easy, that's for sure." Talira smiled faintly. "You have earned another day among us, outsider. But your trials are far from over." As the tribe dispersed, Ethan sat near the fire, his body aching, but his spirit buoyed by a sense of accomplishment. He was beginning to understand the jungle and the tribe that lived within it, and for the first time, he felt like he might actually belong. Ethan woke the next day feeling sore but accomplished. He had survived the jungle trial, and for the first time since crash landing on this strange planet, he felt like he had taken a step forward. The tribe was beginning to see him as more than an outsider, though he knew trust was a long road. Talira had made that much clear. The village was bustling as usual. Women carried woven baskets filled with fruits and herbs, while others prepared tools and weapons. As Ethan stepped out of the small shelter he had been given, he noticed the glances from the tribe were less suspicious, more curious. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Talira approached him with her usual commanding presence. "You did well yesterday," she said. "But survival is only part of what it means to belong. Today, you will help the tribe." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Help how?" She gestured toward a group of women repairing a large wooden structure near the edge of the village. "Our defenses must be strong. You will assist in reinforcing them." "Building?" Ethan said with a grin. "Now that's something I know how to do." Ethan joined the group working on the defensive structure, a tall barricade made of thick logs and vines. The women watched him closely at first, but as he began to work, they seemed to relax. Using the skills he had learned back on Earth, he suggested reinforcing the weaker joints with additional support beams and binding them with the stronger vines from the jungle. Though there was a language barrier with most of them, his gestures and demonstrations got the point across. One of the younger women, Lyra, hesitated before mimicking his method. When it held firm, she smiled at him, a small but significant gesture. Ethan returned the smile, feeling a sense of camaraderie growing. As the day went on, Ethan worked alongside the tribe, hauling logs, tying vines, and occasionally dodging playful teasing from Lyra and a few others. For the first time, he felt like he was contributing, not just surviving. By midday, Talira returned to inspect the progress. She walked along the barricade, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "You've improved its strength," she said, looking at Ethan with a rare hint of approval. "Your methods are different, but effective." "Glad to hear it," Ethan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Earth engineering isn't so bad after all." Talira's lips twitched in what could almost be called a smile. "Perhaps you have more to teach us than I thought." Her words surprised him. Talira had been guarded, almost cold, since the day they met. This was the first time she acknowledged his value openly. It was a small victory, but one Ethan knew he had earned. That evening, the village gathered around the central fire. It was a time for stories and song, a way for the tribe to bond. Ethan sat quietly, listening as Talira and others spoke in their melodic language. He didn't understand most of it, but the tone and gestures told him enough. These stories were about strength, unity, and survival. To his surprise, Lyra stood and gestured for him to join her. The tribe murmured in surprise, but no one stopped her. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to do, but Lyra smiled and extended her hand. Taking it, he stepped into the circle. Lyra handed him a simple instrument made of hollowed wood and signaled for him to play. Ethan chuckled nervously. "I'm no musician, but I'll try." He tapped the instrument lightly, creating a steady rhythm. The tribe joined in, clapping and singing in harmony. For the first time, Ethan felt like more than just an outsider. He was part of something greater, even if only for a moment. As the night wore on, Talira approached him near the fire. You are learning our ways, she said, her tone softer than usual. But you are also teaching us. Perhaps that is why the jungle brought you here. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her words. Maybe, he said, or maybe we're just figuring it out together. Talira nodded, her piercing eyes meeting his. We shall see. For the first time since his crash, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope, not just for survival, but for belonging. The sun rose over the jungle, bathing the village in golden light. Ethan woke early, sensing something was different. The air was heavy with tension, and the usual lively sounds of the tribe were replaced with hushed conversations and hurried movements. He stepped out of his shelter, scanning the village for Talira. She found him first, her expression grim. Ethan, she said, her voice carrying the weight he hadn't heard before. We have a problem. What kind of problem? He asked, his muscles tensing. Talira gestured toward the jungle. Scouts have reported signs of predators moving closer to the village. These beasts are not ordinary. They are the jungle's fiercest hunters, and they only come this close when food is scarce. Ethan frowned. What can I do? Talira's gaze was steady. We must drive them back before they reach the village. You have proven your strength and skill, but now you must prove your loyalty. Will you fight with us? Ethan didn't hesitate. Of course. The tribe gathered near the outskirts of the village, armed with spears, bows, and other weapons crafted from the jungle's resources. Ethan stood among them, holding a spear Talira had handed him. It was lighter than he expected, but perfectly balanced. He felt the weight of their expectations as they prepared for the confrontation. Talira addressed the group in their melodic language, her voice steady and commanding. Though Ethan couldn't understand all her words, he recognized the determination in her tone. This was about more than survival. It was about protecting their home and each other. As they moved into the jungle, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The dense foliage seemed to close in around them, and the usual hum of wildlife was eerily absent. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves put Ethan on edge. Talira raised her hand, signaling the group to stop. She pointed to tracks in the soft earth, massive paw prints that led deeper into the jungle. They are close, she said quietly. Ethan gripped his spear tighter, his heart pounding. This wasn't the first time he'd faced danger, but the stakes felt higher now. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the tribe that had begun to accept him. The attack came suddenly. From the shadows, a pack of sleek, feline-like creatures burst forth, their glowing eyes locked onto the group. Their sharp fangs and claws gleamed in the dim light, and their growls sent shivers down Ethan's spine. The tribe moved as one, their movements precise and practiced. Talira shouted commands, her spear flashing, as she fended off one of the beasts. Ethan found himself face to face with one of the creatures. It lunged at him, its powerful body a blur of motion. He barely dodged in time, thrusting his spear forward. The weapon found its mark, and the creature let out a piercing cry before collapsing. Ethan's breath came in short gasps, but there was no time to celebrate. Another beast was already charging toward him. Lyra, the young tribeswoman who had warmed to him, appeared at his side, her bow drawn. She released an arrow that struck the creature mid-leap, sending it crashing to the ground. Stay focused, she shouted, her usual lightheartedness replaced with fierce determination. Ethan nodded, his grip on the spear tightening. Together, he and Lyra held their ground, fighting off wave after wave of the predators. The rest of the tribe moved with similar efficiency, their unity and trust in one another evident in every coordinated attack. Hours later, the jungle fell silent once more. The remaining predators had retreated, their glowing eyes disappearing into the shadows. The tribe stood victorious but weary. Talira surveyed the group, her sharp eyes assessing the injuries and losses. When her gaze landed on Ethan, she gave a small nod of approval. You fought well, she said as they returned to the village. You have proven that you are not just an outsider. You are one of us. Ethan felt a surge of pride and relief. He had risked his life for these people, and in doing so, he had earned their trust. For the first time, he truly felt like he belonged. As the village celebrated their victory that evening, Talira approached him by the fire. "The jungle tests all who live here," she said. "Today, you showed that you have the heart of a warrior. You are no longer just a guest. You are part of our tribe." Ethan smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. He had come to this planet as a stranded outsider, but now he was something more. He had found a new home, and with it, a new purpose. But deep down, he knew the jungle wasn't finished with him yet. There were still more trials to come. The jungle awoke with its usual symphony of sounds, chirping insects, distant animal calls, and the rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. But for Ethan, the day felt different. The air was lighter, and the tension that had hung over him since his crash seemed to have lifted. Last night's victory against the predators wasn't just a survival moment. It had cemented his place among the tribe. For the first time, he wasn't just an outsider trying to survive. He was one of them. As he stepped out of his shelter, the village was alive with activity. The women worked together, repairing weapons, weaving ropes, and sharing laughter. Some even greeted Ethan with small nods of acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that he had earned their respect. Talira approached him, her tall frame commanding as always, though her expression was softer than he'd ever seen. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "the tribe has made a decision. You are no longer an outsider. From this day, you are one of us." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "One of you? Are you serious?" Talira nodded. "You fought for us. You protected our home. You have proven your worth. The jungle has tested you, and you have passed." A wave of emotion surged through him. Relief, pride, and gratitude. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "It means more than I can say." The tribe gathered in the central clearing for a ceremonial ritual to mark Ethan's acceptance. He stood at the center, surrounded by the glowing totems and the rhythmic beats of tribal drums. Talira stepped forward, holding a small bowl filled with the same green liquid she had used the first day they met. She dipped her fingers into the bowl and painted symbols onto Ethan's face, marking him as one of their own. As the tribe began to chant, Ethan felt a strange sense of belonging. He had started this journey as a lone survivor, but now he was part of something greater. The bonds he had forged with these people were unlike anything he had ever experienced. After the ceremony, the atmosphere shifted to celebration. The tribe danced around the fire, their movements graceful and hypnotic. Lyra, the young tribeswoman who had fought beside him, approached with a broad smile. "You did it, human," she said teasingly. "You're one of us now, but don't let it go to your head." Ethan laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Don't worry. I know I still have a lot to learn." Lyra handed him a carved wooden cup filled with a sweet, tangy drink. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her own cup. "To new beginnings," Ethan echoed, clinking his cup against hers. As the celebration wound down, Talira called Ethan aside. They stood at the edge of the village, the jungle stretching endlessly before them. "You have adapted well," she said, her tone thoughtful. "But I must ask, what do you intend to do now?" Ethan hesitated, looking out at the glowing trees. "Honestly, I don't know. I came here because of a crash. I thought all I wanted was to leave. But now, I'm not so sure." Talira studied him, her piercing gaze softer than usual. "You have a place here, if you choose to stay. But if the time comes when you must leave, we will not hold you back." Ethan nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Thank you. That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, Ethan settled into his new role within the tribe. He worked alongside them, hunting, building, and learning their ways. He shared what knowledge he had, teaching them some of Earth's techniques for tools and construction. In return, they taught him how to live in harmony with the jungle, to see it not as a threat, but as an ally. He found himself growing closer to Lyra, whose sharp wit and fierce determination had become a constant source of motivation. Together, they explored the jungle, uncovering its secrets and marveling at its beauty. Ethan no longer thought of the jungle as a place of danger. It was his home. And while he didn't know if he would ever leave, he knew one thing for certain. The tribe had given him a second chance at life, a purpose he hadn't realized he was searching for. As he sat by the fire one evening, surrounded by his new family, Ethan looked up at the stars. He had crash-landed here as a stranger, but now he was part of something greater. The jungle had tested him, and he had not only survived but thrived. In the distance, the jungle hummed with life, as if acknowledging his journey. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly at peace.